There are 354 Hall of Famers. For some, the journey takes years, but amazingly, from the 354 bronze busts, 90 of those were first-year eligible nominees, blasting their way through the semifinalists and finalists countdowns with their arrival to Canton, Ohio. Yes, there are the marquee quarterbacks like Peyton Manning.
I promise you we'll keep your legacy alive forever.
Thank you, Dave.
Welcome
appreciate
to
it very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you
so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for.
But even great defensive players get ambushed by President CEO David Baker.
That was pretty cool, but just winning the game and
How you doing, Charles? Sorry to interrupt your interview, but I was trying to knock on the front door and nobody was answering.
I'm supposed to be doing an interview, and this what y'all, okay. I told myself I wasn't gonna cry.
This year, the wide receivers dominate the category. Anquan Bolden, Andre Johnson, and Steve Smith Sr. But it's only training camp. Who knows who will be there in November? And then the last cut in January before the 49 selectors enter the world's largest jury room during Super Bowl week. But that is for us to find out today. Welcome to Hall of Fame Productions Class of 2022 Selection Show Special.
This is a presentation of the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Hello and welcome to the Pro Football Hall of Fame's 2022 Selection Show Special. I'm your host, Jameer Howerton, and as always, we have a great show for you. Today, the Pro Football Hall of Fame has announced the 122 modern-era players who were nominated for this year's class. And helping me break down this list from the USA Today NFL columnist, Jarrett Bell. Also from the class of 2020, Mr. Isaac Bruce, because guess what? He knows a thing or two about being on this list. And finally, you'll get a chance to hear from some of the players that are on this list as well. But coming up now, we get a chance to hear from longtime head of the selection process who has administrated all of the meetings for the Hall of Fame selectors. Vice President of Museum and Exhibit Services, Mr. Salim Chowdhury, is kicking off the show with us. Salim, welcome to the Selection Show Special. It's an honor to have you here because we feel like it's so necessary to have someone from the Pro Football Hall of Fame just to kind of break things down and put it in its proper context of this news release of the 122 modern-era nominees. Now, before we dive into that, you and your team have been extremely busy. We just had twice the fun in 21, but for you guys, it's been going. It's been rolling. Tell us all about it.
Well, actually, for the process for the class of 2022 began before we even had the enshrinement for the class of 2021 and 2020 last month in August. We were compiling nominations for the seniors, contributors, and coaches committee, and we were putting together information for them for our subcommittees for meetings that took place immediately after the enshrinement in August, in which we determined the coach, senior, and contributor finalists.
So let's talk about who's been nominated so far and not nominated, but who's been a finalist so far.
Cliff Branch, a wide receiver with the Oakland Raiders in the 70s and early 80s, is the senior nominee. The coach nominee is Dick Vermeil, who took the Philadelphia Eagles to the Super Bowl in 1980 and, of course, won the Super Bowl with the St. Louis Rams in 1999. And the contributor nominee is Art McNally, the longtime supervisor for the NFL officiating staff.
What was that process like, Salim, if you can tell us, because I know there's a lot that goes into working out to get these guys on the list.
Well, it's not easy to get that final spot in those three categories because there's so many deserving people that have yet to be considered for the Hall of Fame. So it's a grueling process for our committees that are charged with determining this finalist. And, they take a lot of time reviewing the subjects, interviewing people. And then when we have those meetings, it's 6, 7 hours of debating and discussing each of the candidates and really tough votes to get down to that one singular finalist in each of the categories. Being in that room, it's fascinating to talk about all the things, or to hear them talk about the things that they discuss, trying to make these decisions. And you can just feel their pain in terms of having to make tough decisions to eliminate candidates as opposed to bringing them all in.
Now, Salim, the process has definitely changed with COVID-19 and the protocol. So what's that been like, conducting all of these meetings Zoom?
Well, when the pandemic hit, obviously it was a concern for everyone around the world and the country. Certainly, we had to continue to do our job here as diligently as we could. And so conducting these meetings over Zoom, we had some doubt as to whether it would work or not. And frankly, it went off without a hitch and we had no problems whatsoever. And so we were able to effectively conduct our meetings virtually as opposed to doing them in person.
Salim, as I mentioned earlier, the 122 Modern-Era nominees have been released. Let's dive in and talk about this. How does this list come about? How do players get nominated to be on this list?
Well, the great part of our selection process is that anyone can nominate someone to be elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The only criteria that you need to be elected or nominated is that you had to have played at least 5 years. You had to have made at least one Pro Bowl, all conference, or all pro team. And so those are the buckets that you need to check. And so any fan can write in, they can call in, they can email us and say, hey, I want so-and-so to be nominated to Pro Football Hall of Fame. Our selectors, 49-person selection committee, they also are very diligent and watching the nominee list, and especially those that are first-time eligibles, and they will also nominate people for consideration.
Now, Salim, I noticed there the list of the Modern-Era nominees the first year that they were nominated: Anquan Bolden, Devin Hester, Andre Johnson, Steve Smith Sr., Jake Long, Nick Mangold, DeMarcus Ware, Robert Mathis, Vince Wilfork, and Antonio Cromartie. Some really names that I can say in my generation of watching football that just jump out to me. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, what a great group of first-time eligibles that were nominated, and talk about the logjam that we have in the receiver category, because last year we had finalists Torrey Holt and Reggie Wayne, and you talked about Bolden, Johnson, and Smith. They're 9th, 11th, and 12th, respectively, on the all-time reception list, all three of them having over 1,000 receptions. So just the amount of talent in the receiver category makes it even tougher this year for our selection committee, because all of them are deserving candidates and I think will eventually get elected. But getting through that selection meeting is not as easy as you would think. And as we discussed, it's a pretty grueling process going through all those candidates. Devin Hester, oh my gosh, 14 punt returns. That's an NFL record. I mean, you had teams that were terrified to kick toward him. He also had 5 kickoff returned for a touchdown. Jake Long, the former #1 pick overall, and then Nick Mangold, longtime center for the New York Jets. I know you know him well, Jameer,
Sure.
As a Jets guy. And then Robert Mathis, 123 sacks with the Colts. Vince Wilfork, just that clogger on the line that every offensive line had to account for, because he was a huge guy on that line that everyone had to account for. And then DeMarcus Ware, 138.5 sacks during his career. I mean, the talent is just incredible.
And Salim, when you look at the 354 bronze busts, 90 of those were first-year eligible nominees that blast their way through. Talk about that stat.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is that there are more undrafted free agents that are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame than #1 overall picks. So there's a little stat that not many people know, but you're right, only 90 were first-time eligibles. So that goes to talk about how difficult it is to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Just because you become eligible your first year is no guarantee that you're going to make the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Now, this is the next steps in the process. We have the list of 122. Break it down. What are the next steps, Salim?
So we have great partners with Ernst & Young, a Big 5 accounting firm, and they've developed an online voting platform that's totally secure and unique to the Pro Football Hall of Fame that we will distribute to our 49-person selection committee. And on that platform, they will be able to vote for their top 25 candidates. And we'll conduct that vote over the next month and a half, 2 months. And then around Thanksgiving time, we will reveal the top 25 vote getters, the semifinalists, if you will. Those 25 semifinalists will then be voted on again to pare them down to 15 modern era finalists. Those 15 finalists will be considered at the selection committee before the Super Bowl in Los Angeles, along with the 3 categories, the senior contributor and coach category, to determine the new class of 2022. And to be elected, all of those people need at least 80% positive vote to get elected.
Wow. Seems like you got your work cut out for you over the next few months. Well, we want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to pretty much break it all down. And like I said, put it in its proper context. We want to thank you so much. Salim Chowdhury, ladies and gentlemen. Coming up next, we get a chance to hear from class member of 2020 Pro Football Hall of Famer, Isaac Bruce.
My name is Lisa Salters, and I'm proud to be a part of the Pro Football Hall of Fame family. Like you, I have family and friends who have been affected by the COVID pandemic. For me, I have a person who counts on me. That person is my 8-year-old son, Sam. Making sure I don't let Sam down is important to me. That's why I'm getting the COVID vaccine as soon as it's available to me. You may be nervous about the vaccine, I get it. I'm a little bit nervous too. But we have to overcome our hesitancy and help to save lives. We've got to remember the vaccine was developed and then tested by people who look just like you and me. We need you to get the COVID vaccine to protect yourself, your elderly relatives, your mother, your kids, your entire family. Get the vaccine for the person, for the people who count on you. So make your plan today. We are counting on you.
Please visit the Centers for Disease Control website at cdc.gov for information on the COVID-19 vaccination and other safety information.
I felt so comfortable and leaving the game as gracefully as I came in and as I played it. I left it all out there, and my knees said you can't do it anymore. My mind at times said, hey, body said you can't do it anymore, and I was totally fine with that. And it was still at times, you as a competitor, you have some feelings, and you feel it sometimes, but since then, I honestly can say, having played in the National Football League, letting folks in the league and beyond the league know that what I wanted to get into and what I wanted to be post-career really helped too. And I'm still shaping myself. I'm still growing. I'm still evolving, and I love that about life, and I love that about myself. And the National Football League has played a huge role in my development, man. And it continues to do that. And now I have an opportunity post-career to share that with people, particularly the guys in our league, but even in our communities.
Welcome back to the 2022 Selection Show Special. That was a listen to last year's finalist, wide receiver Torrey Holt, on making it extremely clear that he had left everything out there on the field. Well, guys, I am super pumped because now we are joined by class member of 2020 Pro Football Hall of Famer, Mr. Isaac Bruce is joining us. Isaac, welcome to the show.
What's up, Jameer? Thanks for having me, man.
Oh, man, before we dive in, I got to talk about your backdrop first and foremost. I know I always hear you talk about faith, family football. Right. And when I look at that backdrop, man, it speaks volumes to that. Tell us all about it.
Well, I like being outside the box, Jameer. So a lot of people like framing their Super Bowl trophies, their accolades, and their family and other things that that have already been accomplished. For me, I like framing my future. So that way I can keep it before me and set another goal, reach another goal, and make another board, man. So this is my board, kindly done for me by one of the members of my gym in South Florida, Candy. Did a wonderful job. And here it is, man. I'm showing it to the world right here on your show.
Wow, this is the exclusive, man. Oh, man, thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving us the time. Well, Isaac, the Pro Football Hall of Fame just released the 122 Modern-Era nominees for this year's class. You know what it's like to be on this list. You've gone through this process. But first, we got a chance to open up, and we heard from one of your brothers, one of your teammates, part of the greatest show on turf, Mr. Torrey Holt, who was a finalist last year. Just hearing him talk about how he left everything out there on the field. He has no regrets. You were in the locker room with him. You know better than anyone what he meant by saying what he said.
Well, I tell you what, one of the first things that stood out with Torrey Holt when he first came to St. Louis was just his willingness to learn. I mean, I thought he was a student of the game, very, very well adapt to the concepts that we wanted to run on offense. And more than that, just his character. I thought he was a very well buttoned up young man when he first came in the locker room, always singing, always happy. He always had a little mini concert in his locker. And I think, what didn't stick out to a lot of people is what stuck out to me about Torrey Holt was that, just seeing him pack his travel bag, for road trips. I thought it was splendid because he had everything tightly rolled up, tightly knit, put together, and he could put a lot of different articles into this one roller bag. So I was impressed by that. I mean, a lot of guys don't do that. So just to see a rookie come in and do something of that nature and have a good character and a good football player, he exceeded everything that we thought we would have when we drafted him out of North Carolina State.
Isaac, what would it mean to see him? We look at the greatest show on turf, the members, yourself, Marshall Faulk, Orlando Pace, Kurt Warner, who are represented here in the bus gallery. What would it mean to not only, him, we know what it means to Torrey, but what would it mean to the brothers?
It would mean a whole lot, not only to myself, but those guys that you mentioned earlier, because, we all had something to do with the development of Torrey Holt. When he first came in, we gave him whatever he needed to be comfortable, to be successful. He was engaging, and just to see him develop before our eyes, it was a masterpiece because he went from just being this 6th overall pick to a pro bowler immediately. And he was a number 1 wide receiver. He never felt like he'd come in and just be and settle for being a sidekick to anyone. He always had a number 1 mindset, which is important in our league, because when you're confident to go out and make plays week after week, year after year, you turn into a Torrey Holt. And that's exactly what happened with him, man. So I think, him being not only another finalist this year, but also being selected as an inductee, I think it'll mean the world not only to Torrey Holt and his family, but his Ram family as well.
That's amazing. And, with this list that was just released, from the perspective of a former NFL giant, a former NFL legend, a former NFL great, when this list comes out, and, it's so funny because I spoke to Rondé Barber and he made it clear, like, I've done all I can do, and as Aeneas Williams say, my career is cemented. So it's cemented. But when you see this list, does it kind of stir up emotions like, oh my God, here we go again? Like, man, and it's like, it is really nothing you could do per se to kind of sway those 49 selectors.
Well, after my playing days were complete, and, my first time having my name on that list, what happens is my heart jumped into my stomach and I couldn't sleep that night. Unfortunately, I didn't get selected that first year. And then the previous years, you kind of get used to it. You kind of, get familiar with the process of it. And you kind of treat it like you would a division game. We know these guys know me. I'm on this list. They know I like to run this route. I know what happens after the 122 comes out. Then you have the 25 selection, and then it's down to the 15. So I know the routine and the process of it. So you kind of get used to it and start to anticipate things. And we're humans. We have that human element about us. And we say, you know what, this guy's on the list. So I think it'll be me, this guy, and this guy. So we play that game within our heads. But it's always up to the selection committee, man. I think they have a very tough job to do. I don't envy them at all. It's also great to see 2 gold jackets in the room that are part of that selection committee to choose these guys, because these guys that are on this list had great careers, Jameer. And let's just be real about that, man. They played some amazing football. They're great people. And who knows, they'll be on this, maybe have a bust one day soon.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump right into it. We already talked about your former teammate, Torrey Holt, but one of the guys who I look at your list, Andre Johnson, he is a first-year eligible. Your thoughts on him?
Well, Andre is a guy that I truly enjoyed playing from his days at the University of Miami. He's a big physical guy, and I love big guys who can play like a little guy. I mean, it throws me into my thinking of the great Al Toon for the Jets. You know, he's a big guy that can get in and out of his breaks. It wasn't his fault where he was selected. And I say that to say this because, you know, we don't have many playoff impactful moments from Andre Johnson. But when you're a student of the game, a guy who knows football and can watch how guys are developed and how they play the game, you obviously have to say that Andre Johnson was one of the better players ever to play in our league. Special, make big catches. He was hard to get around. He was elusive and can take the top off the defense. So that's one of the things I loved about him. And it just shows us once again the importance of leadership. When you go into a program, when you go into a franchise, if the leadership is shaky, you could waste a lot of great talent. And unfortunately, you know, we didn't have a chance to see Andre Johnson at his peak, at his prime, and playoff and meaningful games in late December, late January. But guys like myself, I know what he brought to the table, man, and he's very well deserving to be on this list.
Another wide receiver on your list of players to watch out for was Henry Ellard. Tell us about him.
Now, I'm not going all wide receivers, man. It's hard to do, but, you know, when I watch football games on television, my eyes automatically go to the wide receiver and the defensive backs. What can I say about Henry Ellard? Special talent. I think one thing to note is that, you know, Henry Ellard played 16 years in the league, had some great coaches, had some great impactful moments in our league. But here's the thing. When he was drafted second round out of Fresno State by the Los Angeles Rams, he was drafted to a team that had the great Eric Dickerson. So it was student body left, it was student body right. And, you know, from having a relationship with Henry Ellard, you know, I got the background on that story. And it's that he didn't start catching passes until his 3rd season. He was so hungry for the football that he decided to start, you know, become a punt returner and ended up going to the Pro Bowl as a punt returner. Great route runner, connoisseur of routes. And then he met the offensive coordinator, Ernie Zampese. When they got together, he started catching passes, 70 catches here one season, 80 catches another season. But you talk about a guy who has, I won't say only 800 career catches, but he totaled well over 13,000 career yards. And for me personally, one of my things that I look at for wide receivers, my personal criteria is what he does with the ball in his hands. What is his yards per catch? What does that look like? Because that tells the story about who a guy is. So if you look at a running back, you don't look at his carries. You want to see his yards per touch. So Henry Ellard had well over a first down and some every time he touched the football.
And I also look at running back Fred Taylor, who made your list.
Fred Taylor, man, one of those combinations of speed and power. Longevity in the league. I think he was one of those hard-nosed running backs that carried a franchise for, a lot of years down in Jacksonville. So I always enjoyed seeing him play. Fortunately, I didn't get an opportunity to play that many times against him. But, you know, he leading a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars to playoff games, playoff wins, games they weren't supposed to win in the playoffs. I believe they beat Denver on the road after their little run, 2 Super Bowl runs. But I think Fred Taylor was one of those guys with that combination where he can run in between the tackles, he can run hard, and at the same time, he could hit home runs. So he was that special type of guy.
As we jump to the defensive side of the ball, one of the big fellas that jumps out, and he was a finalist last year as well, Richard Seymour.
Yes.
Tell us about your thoughts on him.
Well, Richard Seymour, he was one of those anchors for the New England Patriots. Fortunately and unfortunately, in my era, he was one of those guys that you had the game plan for. And, you had to double team because he would wreck offense. He would wreck a quarter. And if you didn't double team him, he could wreck your game. So I think he was one of those stalwarts that was in that Belichick defense that really made himself stick out. We're all playing a system, but once you can shoot past that system and that cream rise to the top, you get a Richard Seymour. So he was one of those guys that commanded a double team and made plays consistently for the New England Patriots.
And two guys you probably would have battled against at that defensive back position, Eric Allen and Asante Samuels.
Oh man, what more can I say about Eric Allen other than he was a great cornerback, and I'm kind of biased towards cornerbacks who really didn't play too much zone. Guys who had to go out there on the island and cover a guy up. He was one of those guys, man. He was never in a hurry, but always in the right place at the right time. You just look at his career interceptions, they're up there. So he's right there. Not only did he do it with a great defensive team in Philadelphia, but when he was when he signed with the New Orleans Saints down in Louisiana, he was just that special talent, man. We always had the game plan and make sure that we tried to make him as uncomfortable as we could, as far as just getting in his way, blocking him, trying to cut this guy, do stuff that will probably, get him upset, to kind of get him off his part of the grass. But just a unique talent, a guy who can anticipate, a lot better than just really guessing. So, and his career interceptions proves that.
And Asante Samuels.
Asante Samuels, man. Another guy, another New England Patriot, a guy with huge amount of interceptions. You look at his career interceptions. I think he's passed maybe 50, close to 50. What he did in postseason play. Like I mentioned earlier, we're all part of systems. We play in a system, but what can you do? What kind of impact can you have within that system in which you're playing? Asante Samuel came after the Ty Laws of the world, fit right in and took that next step, took that position to the next level, made impactful plays in big games, picking off greats like Peyton Manning, pick sixes. I think he's in a special category. And I saw him not long ago where, he and Dick Knight, Train Lane are maybe two of three guys that have maybe 56 interceptions. I think 2 pick sixes in the playoffs. So I may not be getting it right, but we'll do the research on that. But definitely a great player in his own right. Played a lot of man coverage underneath and anticipated routes well, and definitely deserving of being on the list.
Wow. Well, Isaac, you got a mean list there. But before we let you go, as I said earlier in the tease, that this is a wide receiver dominant, list. Dominated by the wide receivers, excuse me. And we're in training camp. It's 122 players. Like you said, we got the cuts that are going to go down to 25 right. And 25 to 15. But when you look at the first year eligibles, and we talked about Andre Johnson, Anquan Bolden, Devin Hester, and Steve Smith Sr. First year eligibles.
It's amazing. Those names that you name are all guys who surpassed their draft selection. When you look at Steve Smith, third round pick out of Utah, really didn't start, making an impact as a wide receiver probably until his third season. He was a punt returner, kick returner type guy. And once he got that opportunity to play wide receiver, man, he showed you what he was made of. Very smooth, very underrated as a route runner, I felt like. But a guy who could make explosive plays at any time in the game, and he was a home run hitter as well. Anquan Bolden, similar. Let's just look at his first game. His introduction into the National Football League was a 200-yard receiving game as a rookie, and I believe that was in Detroit. But just strong, physical, always there, great production, and I think another guy that's deserving of being on this list. Great guys, great names, big names on the list. So it's definitely going to be a hard selection for this selection committee to come down to 25. But, that's what they get paid the big bucks for.
Absolutely. And one name that's already a finalist is your former head coach, Dick Vermeil.
Hey, what can we say? I mean, when you talk about Coach Vermeil, he's the guy, a person that I call one of the most loyal guys I've ever met. Took two struggling franchises to Super Bowls. Won a Super Bowl, Super Bowl 34, and a player's coach. But he got after you. He was very caring, very knowledgeable of the game of football, and developing players. You can see the guys that on his coaching tree. You can see the players that are on his coaching tree as well, how he developed them, made them better football players. So very well deserving to be a finalist. And I think this year is the year for Coach Vermeil, and it'll be tears and wine everywhere, man, for this celebration.
Well, Isaac, man, I want to thank you so much for your time. Great list and great breakdowns. Thank you so much. Well, coming up next, we get a chance to hear from one of the 49 selectors from USA Today. NFL columnist Mr. Jarrett Bell joins us right here for the Selection Show special. Stop by the Pro Football Hall of Fame store, just like Hall of Famers, for exclusive Hall of Fame gear. Make your friends and family Hall of Famers. With all 32 teams in the store, there's something for everyone. Open 7 days a week and no admission to come and shop. Stop in today. Or visit us online at profootballhof.com/store.
You're nominated as a coach, and it's pretty amazing there are only 27 coaches in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that is amazing. I think the new mechanics is going to adjust that just a little bit. But George, I've coached against 14 of them, 12 of them as a head coach, 2 of them as an assistant coach. So I'm extremely excited because to be put in their same class and put in the same Hall of Fame that they're in is really overwhelming for me as a football coach and a person.
Welcome back to the Pro Football Hall of Fame's 2022 Selection Show. As you can see, that was a listen to finalist head coach Dick Vermeil on what it would mean for him to be the 28th head coach enshrined here in Canton, Ohio. Well, I'm super excited to be joined by our next guest. NFL columnist for USA Today and one of the 49 selectors. That's right, guys. As promised, we are now joined by Mr. Jarrett Bell. Jarrett, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jameer, how are you? I appreciate you having me for this.
I'm doing great, sir. I'm doing so great. Earlier we got a chance to hear from Salim Chowdhury, and he broke a lot of the things down. But to have you here to kind of put it in the perspective from one of the 49 selectors of this whole entire process, as you know, the Pro Football Hall of Fame released the 122 Modern-Era nominees. Just when you look at it, it's 122.
Yeah,
and some NFL giants, and you look at the list of the first year eligible. Just taking a step back, when you and your colleagues are putting this list together, if you could just take us through the process of how it's formulated.
Yeah, a lot of people can get on the list of 122, and basically, as a player, if you made All-Pro, if you made Pro Bowl, or by the way, if you got nominated by a selector or by fans or by an NFL team or official, you can get on this preliminary list. And, there are no slouches on this list by no means. Now, you could split hairs and say, well, this guy never made the Pro Bowl or only made the Pro Bowl once or twice versus somebody that made it multiple times. And sometimes there's even factors for that in terms of why a guy may or may not have had X amount of Pro Bowls. So you can't just go on that, nor can you just go on stats. You look at a guy like Andre Rison, who has enormous stats. Now, I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer versus others who didn't have the stats he had, but that it's just an indication that you just can't go by the pure numbers. And so that's always been the task for us as selectors. And, I've said it in a meeting. I mean, this is why here, right? It's you can't just plug it in a computer and say, okay, this is the guy versus that guy, because there are so many factors that can come. One of the factors is the eyeball test. If you saw the guy play, okay, you know what you saw. And that's a guy like Tony Baselli, who's a returning finalist again. I watched this guy, and he played like 100 games. And some people have said, well, he didn't play long enough compared to other people. But, there are a lot of guys in the Hall of Fame who played, around 100 games, or several guys that have played around 100 games. So he proved it when he was there. But when you saw him play, you go, whoa, this guy is dominating. Because you talk about, guys who may take 3, 4, 5, 6 or more times to get into the Hall of Fame.
Right.
And each time they don't get in, Jameer, just imagine you got to go a whole nother year, and then you might not get in again. And then when it's over, yeah, you're there forever. So that's great, right? But that process, as I've become quite aware of in terms of talking to Hall of Famers over the years and people who have not been selected to the Hall of Fame, it is quite the process. So when I look at this, you mentioned the first time eligibles, that's where you start, because for all of the guys that are on this list who were finalists before, like a Torrey Holt, for example, right? Hines Ward, you say, okay, those guys are right back in the mix. And then all of a sudden you add 8, 10 other guys in there. And it's like, okay, does somebody jump the line? And I don't know if you consciously think about that as a voter, except for the fact that if, Joe Montana's up, just to throw a name out, he's a Hall of Famer, right? There's some guys that once they get to the ballot, Deion Sanders, Bruce Smith, there's like no debate, Reggie White. And so they take a slot right off the bat. A lot of these other guys are very good players and in many cases, Hall of Famers themselves, but it's not as automatic. And so, you look at this list here, and, when I look at this first time eligible list, one of the guys who I think is really intriguing is Devin Hester. Now, Devin Hester was this phenomenal returner, and he has the records to prove it, right? Impact player, Hall of Fame returner, no doubt. But one of the things that has happened over the years, we've had some other guys who were excellent special teamers, like a Steve Tasker, like a Brian Mitchell, and they've not gotten in. Devin Hester may be a bit different because, he has a little more show-stopping appeal, if you will, more marquee value. Now, whether or not that's different, I don't know. But I think if Devin Hester gets in as a returner, there will be no argument about his merits as that guy. And so much like with kickers, we've had a couple kickers that have gotten in, and it's taken a long time. Ray Guy is a punter, got in. Well, here's a returner, Devin Hester. That's a significant part of the game that needs to be acknowledged as well. So we'll see what the rest of the voters come up with in terms of whittling this list down and whether or not Devin Hester makes the cut. But I think he is, quite intriguing. Whereas you look at some of these guys at the other positions, and they were great in their own right. I love Steve Smith. I love Anquan Bolden, man. And now you put them in the mix with Torrey Holt, Hines Ward, and it's a little bit different. But in Devin Hester's case, the absolute best returner during his era. And, I think about Deion Sanders, for example, another one of those, slam dunk guys. And Deion was this great returner, but he also was a great cornerback. So no question there. Well, Devin Hester was only an average receiver, by all accounts, versus being this exceptional, phenomenal, game-changing returner.
And before we let you go, Jarrett, I have to ask you, if you could, take us inside that room for our viewers that are listening and watching, Selection Saturday. I know you guys start at the top of the morning, and Mr. Baker does his introduction, and Salim, and I know at the time, Mr. Joe Horrigan will kind of say their opening comments, and then you guys just go at it. But how tense is it in that room, and how heated does it get?
It varies from year to year in terms of the intensity and the acrimony, right? I will say that. But I think for the most part, everyone goes into that room, and I know I try to, with a certain level of preparation. So, the preparation is a year-round process. So just like we're talking about the 122 now, that doesn't go away, the fact whatever you think about this guy versus that guy, and you carry it forward. What you can do, and what I try to do, and I know others on the selection committee, we'll talk to a lot of people. We'll talk to someone who played against Patrick Willis, and you could tell me what you saw and what you thought about lining up against this guy. And so you bring that to the meeting. So a lot of times we have these controversial cases that really, rightfully so, will draw a lot of headlines and a lot of attention. But I think really from player to player, when we get to 15 finalists, there are a lot of things that need to be hashed out or can be hashed out. Like I said, every now and then you'll have a Bruce Smith and there's not much to say, right?
Yeah, right.
But in so many of these cases, you really have to kind of try to work through it to find out what you may not know about this candidate or that candidate.
It's a fascinating process. I do not envy your job at all. And it's definitely a who's who within the media world. I just remember standing outside in Miami and just watching all the selectors go in and out. And it was just amazing just to see the big names, yourself, Sal Palatino, you mentioned Mr. King, and you're like, oh man, I read this guy's stuff as a kid growing up, and all you guys are there. So for me, it was just an honor. I was in awe of seeing the greats who cover this game that I love and adore are just kind of, you guys are just in the mix doing your thing. So I don't envy your job because it's a lot. It's a lot.
Well, yeah, to that point, I think the thing that you recognize being a part of that group is that you respect these guys. I think that's what you were really just saying. A Jim Trotter, Ed Bouchette, Tony Grossi, guys who have covered this game. That's so valuable. And so I benefit from that, just listening to them and seeing what they've picked up and the perspective that they have. So it's definitely a good group to be a part of, even though we don't always agree 100% on all the things.
Well, Mr. Bell, good luck the rest of the way. I can't wait to catch up with you for our finalist show to see who actually cracks the list. Well, coming up next, we'll get a chance to actually hear from players who were on the list right after this break. Now is your chance to vote for who you think should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame's class of 2022. Go to profootballhof.com/fan vote today and vote for your favorite football legends. As you vote, you'll be entered for a chance to win prizes, including the grand prize of an all-inclusive trip for two to the 2022 enshrinement ceremony in Canton. Vote today at profootballhof.com/fan vote. Andre Johnson was one of the strongest wide receivers to ever play the game. Standing at 6'3", 227 pounds, he had the size, strength, and speed that made him an elite receiver. He played 12 of his 14 years with Houston, where he holds nearly every Texans receiving record. Johnson was named to 5 All-Pro teams and emerged as one of the NFL's most productive wide receivers in the 21st century.
I would describe my style as physical, can go across the middle and take the hit.
Schaub to throw. Pressure coming. Schaub unloads and complete to Johnson. Andre Johnson, touchdown.
When the ball's in the air, it's mine or nobody's. It's up to me to make the play, and if I can't make the play, then I'd rather it fall incomplete. I'm not gonna let the defender intercept it.
Wants Andre Johnson, and Andre makes the catch for a touchdown.
Welcome back to the 2022 Selection Show Special. Those were highlights of wide receiver Andre Johnson, Houston Texans legend, and man, we wish him the best of luck. That was a mean guy on the field. Well, before we wrap up our production, we want to take the time out to listen and hear some rich stories from some of the guys who were on this list. Hall of Fame Productions had the opportunity of catching up with offensive lineman Tony Baselli, defensive lineman Jared Allen, and defensive back Rondé Barber. Mr. Baker always talks about how these NFL giants, they just don't roll out of bed great. There's a lot of hard work, sacrifice, and dedication. But let's take a listen to how these men and who are some of the coaches and players that have helped them along the way.
But as I think about how I got to where I'm at, it's all about the people around me. There's no chance I'm here without, my parents, first of all, the work ethic that my dad, watching him work and what was expected in our household, the support from my mom, my step-parents as well. They were amazing going to all the games. But then I think back, just growing up, Little League Baseball, the coaches that would, taught me how to play sports. And then I'll tell you, one of the biggest was in high school. I was so fortunate. I went to Fairview High School in Boulder, Colorado, and Sam Pagano, who's in the Colorado Hall of Fame, Sports Hall of Fame as a high school coach. His son, Chuck Pagano, defensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears, who just retired. He was so impactful in my life. He taught me about discipline. He taught me how to play the game. He also made me an offensive lineman. I showed up in high school. I wanted to play quarterback, like every other kid. I no lie, I showed up. I'm the quarterback. And first day, we ain't got out of stretch yet. And he came over to me and he said, "Hey, I'm going to move you to tight end." I don't think he had the heart to move me all the way to offensive line right away. He wanted me to at least think I could touch the ball still. And I said, okay. I played tight end. And then next year he says, "You're going to be an offensive lineman." And I remember thinking, I'm like, I had so much respect for him. I did it, and I look back now. If he wouldn't have said, "Hey, this is who this kid is, and he can be good," I'd never be here. I was never going to be an NFL quarterback, and there's no chance. And so I just think of Sam Pagano and what he did in my life.
I got blessed to be drafted by Coach Vermeil, right? And have a team that to understand football the way, in my mind, football still is old school, right? Like, I came into a locker room with 1, 2, 3 Hall of Famers, and then you bring Ty Law and says, well, 4. I played with 4 Hall of Famers in my first 4 years. With Willie Rofe. My baptism by fire was Willie Rofe, who in my mind was the greatest tackle to ever play the game. Tony Gonzalez, Priest Holmes was there. You had Will Shields, Brian Waters, who might be one of the most underrated guards to ever play the game. That dude was a stud. So you're just looking at this, and this was back with Marty, but Marty was in San Diego, so it was still power football. They made me bulk up to 275. I came in at 265. I had to bulk up to 275, and it was run first. We lived by the motto: you had to earn the right to rush the passer. So I learned, and then I had mentors like Eric Hicks and Bonnie Holiday, Sean Barber, Greg Wesley and Jerome Woods. Like Scott Pagina. The list goes on. I had so many influential players that taught me how to be a pro, right? And then you bring in Herm Edwards into the mix, and now I have a mentor on how to be a human. Like, again, Coach, and that's one thing I love about Coach Vermeil. Coach Vermeil taught us toughness. Coach Vermeil would run us through when you talk about a Coach Vermeil practice, like, that is no joke. Like Invincible, that they're not lying. It was no joke. But he would give you a hug and let you know as a man, as an alpha male, you need to show love for each other, right? So, like, wow, like, he created these. Like, I got so blessed to have the right people at the right time in my life.
Coach Gruden got me right in my prime. It was under Gru that I led the league in interceptions one year. It was really when I started making my Pro Bowl, started making my All Pros. Herm's perspective is probably the best because Herm saw me as a rookie in 1997 when I didn't play I only played in one game. My rookie year, and I played in the playoff game, which was my second game, but only one regular season game. So he saw the foundation. He saw the kid that was struggling in training camp, that had to do the extra things, that had to stay later, that had to learn how to be a pro. And then he saw it happen literally the next year, you know, in 98 and then 99 while he was still here. He saw the progression. He's like, okay, you know, I remember talking to him. He's like, young man, you're going to get your opportunity one day. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. And for a young player, you're like, well, what does that mean? I'm going to play 5 games next year, or, you know, I'm actually going to start. You know, you just don't expect where I ended up to be from where I started, if that makes any sense at all. Because from where I started, you know, I was joking with my daughter the other day. She was laughing about all these, you know, oh, you're a Hall of Famer now, whatever. I was like, hey, babe, I started from the bottom, you know. And then her boyfriend here, and he's like, and now you're at the top, you know. It's one of those things. So yeah, I started at the bottom and had to work my way up. You know, I wasn't a first-round draft pick. You know, I wasn't filled with high expectations from a national or even a team perspective. You know, it was a build and it was a climb, and it was something that really made me who I was. And, you know, having to deal with that adversity and having to deal with that struggle is really why I played 16 years and why I accomplished a lot of the things that I accomplished. And it's nice that my coaches, especially those two, because they were part of founding me, you know, have that kind of reverence for the way that I played the game.
That was absolutely amazing to see Rondé Barber tearing up while talking about his former position coach, Herm Edwards, and his then head coach, John Gruden, how much they poured into him and they made him the player that he is today. Good luck to those guys. Well, before I let you go, let's wrap things up. Let's just take a step back and talk about what we learned. Well, from Celine Chowdhury, our vice president of museum, who oversees the whole entire selection process, there are a few dates that we need to look out for. Thanksgiving, around November time, we need to see how this list is cut down from 122 to 25. Then it'll go from 25 to 15th, second week in January. So November and January, we need to pay close attention to see how this heavy dominated wide receiver list is going to shake things out. Also from Jarrett Bell, a guy who jumped off his charts when looking at the list of 122 is special teams extraordinaire Devin Hester. Let's see how he cracks the list. And one thing that Jarrett made mention that, you know, having a special teamer get in like Devin Hester could possibly open up the floodgates for special teams extraordinaire Steve Tasker, Brian Mitchell, and for all the Cleveland Browns hopefuls, Joshua Cribbs. Then, of course, Isaac Bruce. He spoke so highly of all the wide receivers, but one guy on that list that he really wants to see make it in is Torrey Holtz, his brother, his dear friend, a member of the greatest show on turf. It would mean more to those guys. And I'm talking about Marshall Faulk, Orlando Pace, Kurt Warner, Isaac Bruce, to have their other big play, big time Torrey Holtz here in Canton, Ohio. So we want to see who makes your list. We really do. And fans could really become a part of the process and have some fun while doing it. You know, this marks the 12th consecutive year that Ford, the official automobile for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, has teamed up and has invited fans for the Ford Fan Vote. That's right. Fans that are part of the process automatically become eligible for sweepstake prizes, including a grand prize trip for 2 to Enshrinement 2022, Enshrinement Week powered by Johnson Controls. That's right. You can vote as many times as you want on profootballhof.com/fanvote. So be sure to be a part of this process. It's the annual Pro Football Hall of Fame fan vote presented by Ford. It launches today, so fans can go on. They can see the list. They can vote as many times as they want. Fans automatically become eligible for sweepstake prizes, including a grand prize trip for 2 to Enshrinement Week powered by Johnson Controls 2022. Well, on behalf of Hall of Fame Productions, we would like to thank everyone for joining us for tonight's show, and to the nominees, the best of luck to you as you move forward in this process. I'm Jameer Howerton. I'm going to see you next time.
This is a presentation of the Pro Football Hall of Fame.